welcome to the post-game lobby where I'm joined by Andrew Verdiesday and Febivin and Prolly from H2K to take a look back on our first week of playoffs and break down the matchups for the semi-finals. I have to say I'm very impressed by Trevor and the Fish Show. They casted like 6 hours today, but they are as full of energy as ever at the end of the day.
The Fish Show does look a lot older now, though. I can see the wrinkles coming on his face.
That is mean. Okay, well, why did we have such a long day? Well, because we had a fantastic series on our hands in the final series of the week. G2 and Splyce were in a thrilling fight that went all the way to Game 5. The reigning champions, in the end, managed to secure the win, but it was much, much closer than expected, I believe, when we tallied the votes of the analysts and kind of everyone we spoke to. It might be a 3-0, but it's going to be incredibly close in games. Well, the games were close, but it wasn't a 3-0. And it's easy to say, oh, well, was G2 the better team all along? But there's just so much more nuance to this series than that. So probably, was there anything you can point out that G2 was better at in the end?
I think when the pressure kind of started heating up in the games, that's when G2 really was just looking pretty normal. Like that very last Baron fight that won them the game, like Splyce was very, very timid. They weren't sure if they should go for it. And G2 just immediately looked like they knew what they wanted to do, and they just kind of went for it. I think that kind of confidence from G2 is what like gives them these edges in these like longer games and series.
That's something that actually, Vedis, you brought up beforehand when we discussed the semifinals. You said, I want to see kind of the adaptability and the clutchness of G2 in a best-of-5 series, and I think this is a great example.
You've got to remember that this team, they've been to MSI, they've been to Worlds, they went to MSI again. These guys have had a lot of international competition against some of the best teams in the world, and they've been pushed to the very brink multiple times. This scenario for them is not as new as it should be for Splyce. And when you're so close to being able to defeat G2, the reigning kings in Europe, and make yourself into the semifinals and to play at Paris, that is going to weigh on your mind in those last few fights. But as you heard Perk saying, like, he was shoving those ideas out of his head, and he was like, focus on my play, make sure I'm doing what I need to for my team. And as Prolly said, I think that was the key difference in those final few fights.
Yeah, Febivin, I don't think I've ever seen you as animated as when you were watching that game, because it was so back and forth, and you were struggling with the fact that you're Perks' friend, but on the other hand, you know, it would be nice if Splyce won as well for your future competitors also. But what do you think in the end of the mid lane competition? We were saying that Senkox was outperforming Perks, but did it really just come down to keeping a cool head in the final moments?
I mean, I would still say that Senkox outperformed Perks in the series, even though I think the last game, Perks played really well with his ultimates, and like his flanks were really game-changing. And yeah, being able to stay cool in your head. I mean, I'm pretty sure Senkox can do it as well, but maybe Perks a bit more because he played more international events and might be a bit more grown up, I feel like, than Senkox. But yeah, I think Senkox still outperformed Perks, but G2 was slightly the better team today.
Yeah, slightly the better team, which makes it so heartbreaking for Splyce. We saw them after the game, and especially after having not a good or not the best split, we couldn't really say that we've seen immense growth from them. I think that's fair to say. And then Senkox steps up. Wonder has some great games. Trashy was playing out of his mind. The bottom lane carries some games. Like, it must be so, so heartbreaking for them.
It certainly will be, but you also have to have that element of excitement going into the gauntlet too, because you've got a not so great looking Unicorns of Love, you've got a really strong Splyce, and there are a lot more teams still left to see who will remain in the gauntlet, and it's going to lead to some really exciting games here in Europe as to who will be able to crawl through and take that spot.
It will, but with that, after our first week of playoffs, the teams for Paris are locked in, and more importantly, or evenly so, we have our matchup for the semi-finals. It's going to be Misfits Gaming facing off against Fnatic, and H2K versus G2, which is one of the reasons why Febivin was so tense watching this series. We'll talk about H2K, G2 later. I want to start with Misfits Gaming. They beat the Unicorns of Love, which puts them now up against Fnatic, and that will be the first semi-final that will also be played next Saturday. So a quick recap maybe. Verius wasn't as big of an upset, people said, but the fact that Misfits 3-0'd Unicorns of Love so cleanly was kind of interesting.
I think the biggest thing about that series was the fact that we saw a huge amount of growth from the Misfits team as a whole, not only individually, but their ability to work together. And for the Unicorns of Love, they seem to be making the same sort of mistakes and playstyles that they've been making for the entire split. And one of the big frustrations that I hear from pros and analysts is that Unicorns seem to be winning through weird ways. They seem to be winning through a unique style that's difficult to prepare for. And I felt like that through really good prep from Misfits, they were able to expose it and punish it very effectively.
Yeah, they don't really rely on like one strategy to work. It's kind of like, yeah, when they pick Talon, like sometimes it's going to go like 5-0 or 0-5. You can't really consistently say like, okay, we'll have this pick and we know how to play around it. It's like, it just works or it doesn't. There's not much, rhythm to it, I feel like.
So we saw a huge growth from Misfits, even though, Unicorns of Love also had a bit of a questionable draft. So we have to say that Misfits were well prepared. They played well. They had Hansama stepping up, especially cool for him because he'll be celebrating his birthday also in Paris, and he is French. So that's going to be nice. But it's cool to see that evolution because Power of Evil was really all we heard this split, I think, from Misfits. He was always stepping up. He had great stats across the board, but not always that secondary carry. So we'll see if that is enough, Febvin, because now they are going up against Fnatic. So have you seen enough from Misfits that you think that they can beat Fnatic?
It's really hard to say. I think Fnatic is probably the best team right now and like a way step higher than every other team. I think Misfits is like, they play kind of the same play style, but I think they have just weaker players in every role. And also, their drafts are a bit worse than Misfits, I feel like. And yeah, I think Fnatic have like, Cabs, Reckless, and like Soas, like all these star players, which I think will outperform the opponents, and it's gonna be tough for them.
Well, especially like we saw how G2, you said they've been to a lot of events, they have a lot of experience. Take a look at that Fnatic roster. They have a wealth of experience, plus those new rookies that are super hungry. I mean, may not forget Caps, he also played the finals over in the TCL. So there is so much in that lineup, probably. How do you see this going? Is this a clean cut for Fnatic?
I feel like it is. I mean, like, Misfits played really well against UOL, but I feel like they haven't played that well for long enough to bet on them in a way. So I think if they can show up the way they did against UOL, I think it will be a closer series. But I think most likely the way that they played against UOL, like Fnatic won't fall into this trap. Fnatic will have a strong draft. And then, yeah, Fnatic has really strong laners, like a good jungler. Like, I feel like they don't have the same weaknesses that UOL has.
But also, I think that when you think of growth, sure, Misfits, they prepped extremely well, they developed really well as a team, but Fnatic, post-Rift Rivals, and even before that, coming into the third place match in Hamburg, they look like a completely different team. And these guys know how to prepare and they know how to evolve. So they will see this playstyle from Misfits and they will, I believe, be able to effectively adapt and shut it down. And while I do think Misfits will make the series interesting and they will not make it an easy best-of-5 series for Fnatic, I still think the Fnatic's the favorite.
To summarize it, I feel all of you guys are pegging it for Fnatic going to the finals. That would put Fnatic in the finals up against either H2K or G2. Oh my word, this is an interesting semi-final, and it was so nice. I cannot repeat it just to watch it here with some members of H2K. In the end, you got to beat everyone if you want to win the championship, right? But Febvin, is there kind of, obviously a special, I wouldn't say fear, but there's more anxiety going into a best-of-5 versus a G2 that has now proven that even versus a great Splyce, in those final moments, they have enough to finish off the game.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I believe that, I don't know, like, I just have this feeling that people think Fnatic is like the best team in EU, but then I also feel like G2 is like, I just feel like they're a bit better. Like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like G2, yeah, they're just a better, like the best team in Europe, and they will always be. I mean, they have been for like 3 splits in a row now, so. I don't know, I really much rather would have faced Misfits, obviously. But yeah, going up against G2 will be like ultimate test, and if we win against G2, I'm really confident that we will win against Fnatic.
Well, there's a lot of things here. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's like, well, I do think they're the best. So then in the end, if you lose to them, it was right all along. But that aura of invincibility, probably, we thought that was shattered, We thought that it was shattered for G2. Kings can bleed. They lost a couple of series. They almost lost this one. They had to go to the quarterfinals. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with Febvin that they might still be just the best team in Europe?
I mean, I think they're really good for sure, but they are making a lot more mistakes than they used to. Like when they were a really strong team, you know, they went from like, you know, really good to like, you know, beating or matching SKT some games. And in that transformation, they really almost fixed a lot of their problems where like, yeah, Perk is getting caught out or they're having weak laning phases, stuff like that. But then this split, all those problems kind of came back. That made like G2 not the like top. And I feel like that's where they're at right now, where they still have similar issues and they still have really good gameplay. Like their team fights are really confident. Their Baron calls are really, really fast. But they're not this thing like last year where you'd go against G2 and you'd be kind of like shaking in your chair a bit. Like, what do we do against them? Now it's kind of like you can kind of see the weaknesses in the crack show and you can kind of play for that. Or you can just focus on yourself because, yeah, like Splice showed, if you play well, they're not unbeatable.
Well, in the post-interview that with Dracos that Perks also mentioned, he said, well, yeah, I did feel that feeling of shock. Are we going to go out in quarterfinals? In one way, that's all behind them now, right? Maybe that shock effect is not something they have to go through again. Now they can just play freely and crush H2K. This is all hypothesis.
I think it's. I think Perks' performance will definitely be a step up. Something that I had a great chat with Featherman about was, I don't know why, but every time I play against Perks, he just seems to play better. It's just like, and I think that is a respect thing because you do have to remember that a lot of fans, I mean, Alice, other teams respected Featherman enough to vote him as the strongest mid laner in Europe right now. And I feel like a lot of other mid laners show that level of respect towards him. So I think we're in for quite an exciting mid lane matchup. But also the big thing in my mind right now is that H2K this year have really struggled against top teams in Europe. And I think that them going up against G2 will be a big test for them in terms of how well they can prepare, because now they've had to experience firsthand. Well, I say firsthand. They got to sit here and analyze very deeply.
And get Varius's insight.
And my great insight too on some of the weaknesses from G2. But it's about whether or not they can then apply that. Because we do know that H2K are a very smart team. They have a lot of strong individuals. But sometimes the execution is what matters on game day.
Yeah, let's get those two things and discuss them separately. First off, probably, how confident are you in kind of the game of 5 games in a row with drafts, where in game 5 you have to come up with the right thing? How confident in your abilities are you that, at least for that part, you can outsmart G2 or you can make the right decisions if it comes to that?
Well, the good thing that we've been practicing a lot more recently has been involving the whole team in these kind of discussions on how we're adapting. And I think before in playoffs, it was really just me doing it by myself, and the players would give like small feedback, and that became like a really big issue because then our drafts would kind of be on 2 different pages where like I had a feeling and they had a feeling. But now it's become a lot more together where we're reaching conclusions like as a team instead of, you know, very one-sided from my perspective. So I feel like the adaptation between the series is going to be a lot easier than it has been in the past, and I think that's probably been one of our biggest issues when it came to playoffs.
And then, of course, the second one is keeping your head cool in-game when it comes to those clutch moments. G2 is great at doing that. We've seen that. So are you guys confident enough, Evan? Are you confident enough as a team when Probably is not there, right, to make those decisions at the important moments?
Yeah, I would say personally, yeah. It's still really hard, obviously. Like, it really depends how the games go, I think, because sometimes you can get really affected, or I can get really affected by my plays, depending on how I play. Like, if I play really well, I won't get affected at all, and I will play only better. But if I feel like I'm underperforming, then I will play worse. But obviously, I should be able to control this. So, yeah, that's the goal, obviously, and play as well as possible and keep my head cool. And we're gonna win this stuff.
Hey, Perks, you heard it. Take Trick and just go to that mid lane every second.
You will die.
This is planned talk. We've already set the trap.
We're going to move on in a second. I just want to bring up something that we talked about during the day, probably. You were saying how looking at a best of 5, it's kind of like if there's an Olympic athlete that's going to go to the Olympics, and don't get blindsided by the fact that, yes, you practiced for it for 4 years and it's make or break. Don't concentrate on the option of losing. Concentrate on the positive and the fact that you have to win it by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think Perks kind of said that a bit in his interview where at first he thought, like, you know, what happens if I get out in the quarters? And that's the kind of mentality that makes you, like, choke and fail decisions, because you're no longer thinking about, like, what the right thing is to do or how to win. You're kind of just working off of the fear emotion where you're, like, scared to do something, scared for something bad to happen. So this really like, yeah, chokes you up and kind of prevents you from seeing clearly. So that was really good on him that he's able to kind of identify that and brush it off. And that's also, I mean, a thing we've been working on as well. And I think it really comes into play in these longer series where you really need a lot of endurance to make it through.
Yeah. Oh, I almost can't wait for that matchup. H2K G2 is going to be so good, as well as the other one. There's still a lot to be decided in the summer playoffs, and we will get the next fights in the semifinals, starting with Fnatic versus Misfits Gaming, Saturday, the 26th of August.